Vanilla is a miracle of biological inefficiency. It comes from an orchid, which already feels a little unnecessary. Orchids are dramatic. Vanilla is one of the very few orchids that turned all that drama into dessert. The vine can take years to flower, and when it finally does, the blossom is only useful for a few hours. Miss that window, and congratulations! You're now growing disappointment. Outside vanilla's native range, growers have to hand-pollinate each flower by hand, and the whole process was revolutionized in 1841 by Edmond Albius, a 12-year-old enslaved boy on the Isle of Réunion by Madagascar, who figured out a fast way to pollinate the flower with something as simple as a thin stick, a blade of grass, or a sliver of bamboo. And the flavor itself is chemically ridiculous. Real vanilla is not one flavor, it's hundreds of compounds working together. Woody, floral, smoky, deep. Artificial vanillin is just a single note played on a synth. Real vanilla is a 300-piece orchestra playing a chord that you can feel in your teeth. Then, in 1874, Ferdinand Tiemann and Wilhelm Haarmann figured out how to synthesize vanillin from coniferin found in pine bark. And just like that, one of the most complicated flavors in the world got reduced to the part that says, yep, that's vanilla. We got the headline, we lost the article. We got something good enough for a cookie candle, but not the full thing. I've been teaching for over 20 years, and lately I've spent some nights grading papers and lab reports that feel a little like that. Clean grammar, strong transitions, fancy vocabulary, and absolutely none of the weird little fingerprints of real thinking. It's sweet, it's polished, it's also the academic equivalent of artificial vanilla in a gas station pudding cup. We are living in the era of the synthetic essay. Students now have access to tools that can manufacture the appearance of understanding without much of the actual agriculture of the mind. And the problem is not just that the flavor is fake, it's that once we get used to the shortcut, we start forgetting how much real work matters. So today we're talking about the line, how do we give students writing and research support that helps without replacing them? How do we keep the thinking honest and the research real and the voice human? This is student training number 2, writing and research support that stays honest. Okay, here's the thing. The line for today is simple. Support is fine, substitution is the problem. That's the whole episode in one sentence. If a tool helps a student think more clearly, organize better, or find stronger sources, great, use it. If it starts doing the deciding, the interpreting, or the explaining for them, now we have a problem. Now we have vanillin instead of vanilla. Sweet enough to pass at a glance, but missing the depth that tells you that a real human mind was in there. And I think that distinction matters because in a lot of classrooms right now, we're not just dealing with copied answers. We are dealing with polished approximations, work that looks finished before the student has actually done the work of making meaning. So today I want to give you 3 classroom moves that let students get writing and research support without turning the whole thing into a synthetic flavor factory. So let's start with the first move, feedback before replacement. Here's where it gets weird. A lot of students do not actually know how to ask for help without accidentally outsourcing the task. They think, get help with my paragraph and have this rewritten for me are basically the same thing. They are not. So the first move is to make students draft something first, a claim, a paragraph, a rough outline, then, and only then can they use AI for feedback, not a rewrite, not for a better version, for feedback. The teacher language here matters. You need your own rough draft first. You may ask for feedback on clarity, evidence, or organization. You may not ask for a replacement paragraph. And if you use feedback, you need to tell me one suggestion you kept and one you rejected. That last part is the secret sauce, because the key idea is not just that they got feedback, the key idea is that they judged the feedback. That's where the learning is. Can the students explain why a revision made the writing stronger? Can the students explain why a revision made the writing stronger? Can they reject a suggestion that sounds smooth but weakens the actual idea? That's a much better signal than the paragraph that suddenly sounds like it got a graduate degree over lunch. Now, let's apply that to the science room because that's where my brain lives most of the time. Let's say I have chemistry students writing a short CRE, claim, evidence, reasoning, after a reaction rate lab. AI is dangerous here because it loves perfect science. It will try to give an answer that sounds like a textbook, but I don't want the textbook. I want the data from table 4 in their messy lab notebook. I might say, write your own paragraph first, then you can ask for feedback on whether the reasoning clearly connects evidence to the claim. You can't ask for a new paragraph. You cannot ask it to make you sound smarter. You can ask whether your reasoning makes sense based on the data you provided. And this is not just a science move. In ELA, the same line applies. A student can ask for feedback on whether their commentary is too vague or whether a quote is doing enough work. They cannot ask the tool to generate the interpretation for them. The feedback can help sharpen the thought, but it cannot replace the thought. That's the line. The student still has to own the meaning. The second move, and this one matters a lot, research support with a source trail. AI can help start the search. It does not get to finish the research. That's especially important because students are increasingly treating AI like a research shortcut. It is not. It is a brainstorming partner. It can help generate questions. It can help come up with search terms. It can help narrow a topic, but it is not a source. And students still need to read and evaluate the real material they cite. Guidance from APA makes this point very clearly, and work on lateral reading reinforces the same basic habit. Trace claims back to actual sources and check who's behind them. So I want a tiny source trail attached to the work. Nothing huge, just enough to make the process visible. What search terms did you use? What sources did you open? Why does this source seem credible for the task? If you're taking notes, jot this down. A summary is not a source. A source is something you can trace, evaluate, and read. In science, that might mean a student uses AI to generate search terms about reaction rate or collision theory, but then they still have to open the actual article, textbook section, or database result and decide whether it fits. In social studies, it might mean a student uses AI to brainstorm questions about an event, but then still has to read the source and explain whose perspective it represents. Again, different subject, same line, support is fine, substitution is the problem. The third move is disclosure plus verification. Now, I know the word disclosure can make this sound heavier than it is, and I don't mean a confession booth. In higher ed or professional context, you will sometimes hear related ideas described as AI contribution statements, a short explanation of what the tool did and what the human did. I think that idea is useful. I also think that in middle school and high school, we should keep it simple and basic. So if AI use is allowed, add 2-sentence starters at the bottom. I used AI to, I verified or changed it by. That's it. Simple, fast, human. So a student might write, I used AI to get feedback on the organization of paragraph 2. I kept the suggestion to move my evidence earlier. I verified my facts by checking the article from NASA. That is useful. Or a student might write, I used AI to help me come up with better search terms. I changed my claim after reading 2 real sources. Also useful. The goal here is not catching people. The goal here is to make judgment visible. I would say that out loud too. I'm not asking for a confession. I'm asking for evidence of decision making. And that is really what all 3 moves are doing. They're not banning help. They're forcing the student to stay in the loop as the person who still has to choose, verify, and explain. I would take real over shiny every time because messy thinking you can coach is better than polished fog. This does not mean that we should pretend these tools are going away. It means we have to be more precise. We have to define what kind of help preserves learning and what kind of help replaces it. Here are a few lines you could actually say tomorrow. You can ask for feedback, not authorship. You can use AI to open the search, not be the source. If the tool does the deciding, the work is not yours yet. Those are clear. Students can work with clear. So try it this week. Take one writing or research task and add those 2 lines at the bottom. I used AI to, I verified or changed it by. Success looks like students are being able to explain the kind of help they got, the decisions they made themselves, and the thing they checked afterwards. That is enough to start. You don't need a giant system. You need one routine that makes thinking more visible. School should not become a factory for good enough approximations. It should still be a place where students learn how to make something real. The goal is not to ban support. The goal is to keep the real flavor of thinking in the work. Thanks for listening. If you try one of these moves, or if you have a real classroom question about where the line is getting fuzzy, send it my way. Those are the most useful episodes to build from, the real ones.